Awesome. Well, hey everybody. I'm in a little bit different role this week. In case you haven't heard or seen the announcement, I am Jessica Ryder and I'm the new managing director for RVWA. And I am excited to help Monica out this week and with the help of Susan and Jordan, obviously, to bring this week's Coffee, Lunch, and Learn to you all. So we have Dr. Robert Shindell that's going to join us. But before he does, I am going to share with you our amazing sponsor. This month is Huebner Marketing, which if you don't know, they have just, I can't even say all the amazing things they're doing for us on the back end to help us bring everything to you all, to get the new website launched, Career Highway, all of that. So I want to share this message with you from Huebner Marketing.
Hello, my name is Brian Gershner and I'm with Huebner Marketing. And we're really proud to be here and support the Coffee, Lunch, and Learn with RVWA. And we're also really proud to be a sponsor of RVWA and to be able to help them produce and distribute a lot of the marketing they do so that we can bring everybody together here today the way we have. And one of the things we're really proud of is how RVWA is bringing a lot of relevant content and messaging to the industry and how that is just supporting and bringing more and more value to the industry as a whole. I love it too because it's a lot of the same values and efforts that we put into our own marketing. As a marketing agency and working with partners, being relevant and being able to bring that value to the table to your audiences and the people you work with is just a cornerstone of just the principles of marketing and how we help build brands also. Not only building the story, because a lot of you already know the stories of your companies, but being able to put together strategic roadmaps, strategies that help spend the marketing dollars more effectively, to be able to put offensive planning and forward thinking into what's happening so that there's better ability to react and be prepared and just to be there at the right time with the right messages, just so that you can not only reach out to your audiences, but helping to support the sales teams that you have in place that maintain and have those valuable relationships with your partners and your clients. At the end of the day, too, we know talk is only so much in planning. There's a lot of need to really get work done and to be cost effective at that. Huebner Marketing, in response to knowing this, and particularly working in the B2B environments, we have found ways to be very cost effective. We have very large digital support teams and creative teams that help us be very cost effective and to bring solutions and execution to the table to help people get things done. As we know, things never move fast enough often, particularly in industries as things are changing and as times are changing now. But we really are proud of the work that we've done with manufacturers and OEMs. And we're really proud of the work that we've done within the RV industry over the past 25 years and all of the various brands that we have worked with and supported. If you have time, please go to our website, huebnermarketing.com, and check out some of our partners and check out some of the work that we've done. We're really proud of it, and we're really proud to be here today also. Thank you. Enjoy.
Perfect. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Robert, whose consulting company helps companies build, develop, and actually implement the internship programs within them. I like to use the term playing for legacy and passing things on. And Dr. Robert Shindell kind of just mentioned that in our conversation before here. So I'm going to turn it over to him and he's got his presentation ready.
Awesome. Thank you all so very much for coming today and spending some time with us talking about this concept of internships. And just a little bit of an agenda that I put together for today. Do a little bit of an introduction and talk about why we're here and why this thing called an internship is so important. And some lessons that we've learned over the last year that I really think are going to help us build, develop, enhance, grow, modify, and deliver really amazing experiences for young professionals making the transition into the world of work in the future. We want to better define this thing called an internship, and there's really three areas of focus that we found through our research and through really practical implementation that we as employers can make a priority in order to deliver this thing called an internship. We'll talk about some tools and resources, and I want to leave plenty of time for question and answer. So let's get started. And my name, again, Dr. Robert Shindell. I'm President and CEO of Intern Bridge. We are a research and consulting firm located in Austin, Texas. We focus in on gathering information from students that have who have participated in internships and getting their feedback, and also from employers who have hosted internships and other forms of experiential learning. And maybe that's a good time to take a little breather. When we use the word internship, we use that as, let's call it, an umbrella word for all of those things that are under that experiential learning umbrella. Internship, co-op, practicum, apprenticeship, all of those words really have at their core the same concept, and that is meeting a young person from an academic setting and bringing them into the world of work. So, a little bit more about my background. I'm a member of the Distinguished Scientist Advisory Board for the Oak Ridge Institute of Science and Education, where we oversee the internship experiences for more than 10,000 interns across the country for the Department of Energy, working with employers, working with higher education. And I'm also the principal investigator for the National Internship and Co-op Study. And I tell you this not to impress you, but to impress upon you that the things that we have devised and the methodologies that we've devised, it's not my opinion, it's rooted in data. And I think that that's really important as we start to build this thing called an internship, because we need data to make good decisions. We don't need anecdotal information about what one student liked at one company that they interned with. We need to really look at the aggregate of that data in order to make and create frameworks for success. So a little bit about Intern Bridge. We were founded to really bridge that gap. Sorry for the pun on the name, but to bridge the gap between what students expect and what they want and what employers expect and want, and really lessening that and creating that bridge between the two through the data that we've collected and through the frameworks that we've created. And that framework that we refer to is what we call total internship management. And its goal is to create a win-win situation for both the host organization and also the student participating in the organization. We have two books. The darker colored book is, I'm no James Patterson. These are not page turners, but they are really good kind of framework books for delivering an effective internship. And again, based on the research that we've done over the years. So the darker colored book is really kind of a framework for an organization, making sure that you have all the nuts and bolts and all of the pieces of the puzzle that you need to put together. And the lighter colored book is one that we just came out with last year, and that is more focused on helping the supervisor deliver that experience. And if you'd like copies of those books, you can reach out to me and we can make sure that we get those to you. All right, so that's it for the introductions. We got a lot to cover today. I want to leave some time for some questions and answers, so let's get started. And the main question is, why are we here today? And when we think about the core of the concept of an internship, or any terminology that you might use, it is to help a young professional make a seamless transition into the world of work. And as an employer, we have some very dedicated needs. It is talent attraction, it is talent management, it is increasing the diversity pools of our workforces, bringing new thoughts and new ideas into our organizations. And internships certainly can help that when they're done correctly and they're done with the right objective in mind and the right end goal in mind. Because what we don't want to have happen is kind of let's call it the traditional internship or the old school internship where, the student was getting copies and making coffee and really just kind of doing the things that nobody else wanted to do. And for many years, I think really culminating in 2008, with a book that came out by a gentleman by the name of Ross Perlin. The book was called Intern Nation, and it really described the kind of the darker side of unpaid internships and the experiences that students were having. And right about that same time is when we started to really gather some information from both students and employers about their internship experiences. And we found that, yeah, unpaid internships do lead to a not a very positive experience, where paid internships certainly do and help employers really achieve the goals that they're looking to achieve through their program. But when we look at internships and we go out and we try to find information about internships, the significant majority of the information out there is either written from the perspective of higher education or the educational institution or the student. There's very, very little written or focused on when it comes to our perspective as an employer. And the way that we see it is not necessarily the way that interns see it or even higher ed sees it. So we need to really focus on the purpose. What is the purpose for us to want to have this thing called an internship program within our organization? Now, the purpose of internships is certainly nothing new. I mean, we can go back just as far back in human history as you'd like to go. I mean, the very first internship happened when little cave person walked into the cave and big cave person was painting a picture on a wall. And little cave person looked up and said, "Hey, big cave person, that's pretty cool. I'd really like to learn how to do that." And big cave person says, "All right, little cave person, let me show you how." And thus, the very first internship was born because it's about knowledge transfer. It's about how we pass down the knowledge from one generation to the next. We also know that internships became an incredible part of our, of course, the Western society. I mean, if anybody on this call, your name is Baker, or you have a family member, or maybe a neighbor or a friend with the last name of Baker, somebody in their family history probably apprenticed with a baker. For example, my mother's maiden name is Smith. And we know that somewhere in the lineage of our history, a family member was doing an apprenticeship with a blacksmith. And so even our names and in our society can be traced back to this concept of internships and apprenticeships and this transition of knowledge from one individual who has the knowledge to an individual who needs and wants to learn that knowledge. Now, in our society today, it's become even more important as we think about talent management and how can we as a company or an industry really plan long term. Do we have the talent that we need to be successful next year, the year after that, 10 years down the road? And in our society today, one of the things that individuals have is a lot of choice out there to choose different directions that they want to go. So it behooves us as employers to try to make the experiences that we have within our organization or within our industry as attractive as possible to be a magnet for those individuals. So we get individuals saying, "I want to be part of this company because of the experience." Now think about this. Um, for the better part of, I'd say, the last 30, 40, maybe even 50 years, we as employers have really kind of had a luxury where we could say, "Hey, I'm over here. You are the job seeker, or you're the individual who's outside of our organization. It's your responsibility to come to me, and I'm the gatekeeper." Not quite sure that works as well as it used to, especially with the amount of choice that's out there. So when we think about our role, we really have to go and meet them where they are. And the earlier that we dig into that talent pipeline, the better off that we're going to be. There's no, I mean, it shouldn't come as a surprise that there's a lot of organizations that are doing things deeper and deeper and deeper into the educational experience. For example, um, a one of the big four firms, accounting firms, is sponsoring math initiatives within the school district that I live in. Do you think they're doing that for out of the goodness of their heart? Yes, but there's a deeper meaning and reason for them doing that, and that is to tap in and to help um, even elementary school children understand and see a brand with that name. And these are the same organizations that also have incredibly robust internship programs, so that when that student moves from elementary school to middle school into high school, and then they get to college, they see that brand name again and say, oh, I think I remember, they had sponsored this math initiative or something like that. But internships don't just help our individual organizations or even our industry. It really is, think about that concentric circle theory, where you drop kind of the pebble into a smooth pond and you see those ripples go out. Well, the internship obviously impacts the individual student as they are making their transition into the world of work, but it also impacts our company with that talent pipeline. But what about our community? What about our state and region? Because we know that when a student is making that transition into the world of work, and and that happens within their community, they're more likely to stay. I use myself as an example, having I went to high school and college on the north coast of Ohio, and really my intention was, after I graduated, was to stay in that area. But I did not perceive that there were opportunities, and I left and never went back. Concept that many communities are facing called brain drain, where individuals that come to a particular region for school leave the area after graduation because there's not a perception that there's a career for them there. The same thing I think can also happen within individual industries. For example, in the RV industry, can we use the internship initiative to better attract students to an industry that they might not know about? Having worked for example, a college of engineering, I know that the majority of my mechanical engineering students, boy, they wanted to go to Jeep, they wanted to go to Honda, they wanted to go to GM. Um, I, Many of them just weren't aware that there were opportunities outside of the automobile industry for a mechanical engineer. So, this past year has obviously been devastating to a lot of industries, a lot of companies, but we also found that the value of internships was so critically important to so many organizations, because even in the face of a global pandemic, they kept their internships alive, and they just shifted the modality into being delivered in a virtual environment versus the traditional I'm in the office. And we learned some incredible lessons from that. And some of the clients that we worked with shared some of their lessons with us. And if you want a copy of this slide deck afterwards, I can certainly email it out to you. I'll have my email address at the end. But these lessons learned, I think, really help us to formulate and think about when we do get back into a more normal environment, and what can we learn from this time that has been you know difficult and negative, and about communication and getting the buy-in from organizations, and how we transmit our culture. Another organization that we worked with talked about how we deliver the functionality of the software that we use, and defining expectations. um, these are all really important as we start to better define what our internship experience is going to look like, which actually leads us to a really interesting question. What is an internship? And if we were all sitting in a room together and I gave each of you a piece of paper, and asked you to write down the definition of an internship. There are, I think, 14 people that are involved with us today. I may get 16 or 17 different responses back. And that's because the word internship is one of those words in our English language that tends to mean different things to different people. And, it's based a lot on our experiences and our own knowledge of maybe what we had as an experience as an internship, and we use that as a definition. And again, as I mentioned earlier, so much of the focus of internships is on higher education or the educational entity and also the student. So by proxy, much of the definitions that are attached to this are that of how higher education sees it or educational institutions see an internship. And we see that in the definitions that are out there. And I think the last time that I Googled definition of an internship, there were, I don't know, 280,000 different responses. There were a lot of similarities, but there were also a lot of differences. And I think that as we look at and we try to define what an internship is, we look at these things and we say, okay, does that really define what an internship is in my organization? And a lot of times the answer that I get as I work with employers from across the country is no, it really doesn't. So taking the time to really define what it is that we want out of the internship as an organization that's hosting them is really a critical first step. So how do we get to that point? Well, consider this. As we have researched students over the last dozen or so years, and we have researched employers specifically over the last 3 years, we found that the motivational factors for a student wanting to do an internship and the motivational factors for employers wanting to hire an internship create a really good kind of framework for us to look at this, or a schema to look at this through. Because if a student is motivated to do this thing called an internship, to gain experience, to become better prepared for employment, and to get a preview of the world of work, that should be an indicator to us that as an employer who's hosting them, the type of experience that we should be delivering. And the same with the information that we're getting back from other employers is, we want to create this real world experience. We want to enhance our talent pipeline. We want to do this tactical recruiting and gain this talent for our organization. So in the end, as an employer, as an individual organization, an internship really is what we define it to be. And in order for that to happen, we've got to have what I would call a pretty significant paradigm shift. And if we can get away from using the word internship because of the different definitions that that has for everybody, let's talk about how we can deliver an experience of value. An experience of value for the student, but also for us as an employer. So that's some great info, but how do I get my organization prepared to deliver this thing called an experience of value? And we know that if we can focus our energy and our time and our resources, we can deliver that experience of value. But the next obvious question is, where do we focus? What are the things that we need to focus on? And what we found, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, is that if we focus as an employer on these three main concepts, we begin to establish a framework for one, consistency, but two, that real experience of value that we're talking about. So return on investment for us and for the student, our culture, how do we transmit that culture? And how do we meaningfully engage this population of young professionals who are making the transition into the world of work? Let's focus on each one of these. So ROI, we've got to define that. And as an individual organization, what are we looking to get out of this thing? Now, generally, what we found is that the reasons why employers host interns fall generally into one of these 6 categories, with talent acquisition being kind of at the forefront. Now, the question becomes, does the organization understand this? How can we disseminate this information throughout our organization so that we're all on the same page, that we all know why we're doing this thing called an internship or a co-op or an apprenticeship, whatever terminology that you'd like to use. And this also helps us to start that process of setting those goals. What is it that we want to get out of this experience? What is our return on investment? If it's building and developing your talent pipeline, well, that's great. Now, how can we make sure that if that is our end result, how do we achieve that? What's the return on the time and resources that we're going to put in? And how can we quantify that? That building of the talent pipeline is, and whatever your goals are, we really need to focus on. But we also can focus on the idea of branding and how this impacts our relationship with institutions of higher learning or even high schools as they are getting into the career to work transition and this apprenticeship concept and experiential learning. And when we look at employer branding, what we find is a lot of student young professionals, they see the big name. They see, GM, they see Honda, then that's where we need to go. And what we find is that many of the best opportunities and experiences are actually not delivered by many of those large brand names because they're maybe not taking the time to develop those individual development plans for students that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But, when it comes to employer branding, we know what happens when we don't have a good talent pipeline and a brand through that talent pipeline that we're effectively communicating deeper and deeper into the educational pipeline. And as Winston Churchill said, for those who fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And we don't have to go too far back in our history to see another time where we had an economic downturn. Remember this back in 2008? Well, a lot of organizations said, "Oh my gosh, we're going to cancel the offers that we made, and we're going to stop internships because of the economy and whatever." Now, 2020 was certainly a different concept altogether, but still, I think illustrates that when even in those downtimes, the more that we can um, keep up our internship initiatives, the better long-term success that we're going to have. So throughout the talk today, a couple of action points for us to focus on. And the first one is we've got to define your reasons and your ROI for hosting an intern. Because when we do that, we can start to move forward in that second phase of defining ROI, which is getting the buy-in from the organization. And generally there's 3 levels of buy-in that we need to think about. And if your organization is like most, kind of looks like this. You've got your senior leadership, your kind of mid managers, and then you've got everybody else. And each one of these groups has their own, let's call them value propositions about the why we should be doing this. For senior leadership, it's probably, much more high level things, building the brand, having that talent pipeline. And we can communicate that and how the internship experience can help us to do that. But that message may fall on deaf ears with this group because this is the group that's saying, well, wait a minute, I've got my own employees, I've got my own work that needs to be done, I've got my own, supervisor that I need to manage and work with. I just don't have room on my plate to have an intern. So what are the things that we can think about to talk with this group about? Like, for example, are there projects in your division or your department that are just sitting on the back burner that we can just move forward a little bit, maybe having an intern work on? So again, the message with this group might be a little different. And then of course, you've got everybody else. What is the message that they're receiving when they see this young professional coming into the office and, things happening with them and being delivered to them what are they thinking? And do they understand why we're doing this? Was working with an organization a couple of years ago and did a focus group with just a group of folks in the finance department, and they honestly thought that the company was bringing interns in to replace their jobs, and that doesn't really help our mission and what we're trying to accomplish. So we've got to bring this everybody else into the fold if we are going to truly have an experience of value for the student. So we know that, this experience impacts not just the student, not just the company, but also has those longer term effects. So action point number two, get the buy-in and communicate the ROI across the organization. So company culture is an organizational culture, and even industry culture is something that we probably need to think about, and how we transmit culture uh, from those, from to this next generation of young professionals that's moving into the world of work. And you know, a lot of times the idea of cultural transmission was or culture was about fit. Well, do they fit into the culture? Well, they could if we define what that culture is and help them to assimilate to it. So by engaging interns that in activities and projects that highlight the culture that you want to transmit. Let me give you an example. So when everybody went virtual back, in March of 2020, I was working with an organization and we were talking about cultural transmission. And the idea that they had was, well, the student intern gets our culture by being in the office. And I said, well, yeah, that's true. I mean, they do, and that's certainly a way. But then I asked them a question. I said, well, what elements of your culture do you want to transmit? And it was crickets in the room. And they said, well, we've never really thought about it. And I said, well, let's start there. Let's define the elements of your culture that you want to transmit. And then let's figure out a way to transmit it even in a virtual environment. So when we look at culture kind of in the big picture, it could be different things for different organizations, but we've got to define what those things are. And then we've got to further define the behaviors and the activities that communicate that culture to that next generation. And the more deliberate and intentional that we are, the better off that we're going to be. Now, a lot of this falls on the shoulders of the intern supervisor, but they are not the only individual that we need to be focused on. And the supervisor can engage the rest of their team in this process. And we find that when the rest of their team is engaged, the better experience that the individual intern has, but also the organization has as well. So as the supervisor is thinking about culture and thinking about projects and engaging the team, they need to be asking the rest of the team, hey, what do you need? What projects are you working on that you might need some help with? Or, asking them about ideas for meaningful engagement. Engaging these folks to be mentors or helping with an orientation or check-ins or monitoring or just any way to disperse and diffuse that sole responsibility that generally falls on the supervisor's shoulders. Because we all know that culture is really about people. And the more people that your intern has the ability to interact with, the more that we can change and we can transmit that culture. So after we've established kind of our, defining the ROI and communicating that across the organization, defining what cultural transmission we need to happen and how we're going to transmit that, we've got to think about meaningful engagement. And as I mentioned earlier, as employers have really had that luxury of sitting back and saying, it's your responsibility to come to me. But we need to go meet them where they are and take them to where we want them to go and define a path for them that is clear and concise and that meets our ROI objectives. So one of the questions that I get is, okay, I get that, but where are they? Well, let's look back to those motivational factors. And motivational factors are incredibly powerful things to understand. So, for example, and an analogy, if I were, let's say, going to buy a car, and I did all my research beforehand, and I know exactly what I want to get. I want to get a silver midsize SUV that's pretty good on gas, got to have all the bells and whistles, all that good stuff. And I walk onto the lot and I tell the salesperson comes to me and says, "How may I assist you?" And I say, "I want this car," and give them all of the parameters, and they look at it and say, "That's awesome. Let me show you this red convertible." You're going to be like, "What? No, I want this car, this car." And they say, "Oh, that's right. Hey, how about this awesome SUV? Or how about this awesome minivan?" Oh, at that point, I'm leaving. Now, at kind of the surface level, I'm leaving because that person didn't listen to me. But if you go a little bit deeper, they did not meet my motivational need for coming onto that lot. Now, if that individual would have said, "Hey, fantastic, here are 37 different options in, 6 different hues of silver that you can choose from," that's a different story. So when we meet individuals' motivational needs, we start that process of engagement. So we use this a lot in defining the types of activities and the types of things that we know as best practices within internship delivery. So for example, everything that you do in an internship should be able to be a straight line drawn back to one of these concepts: learning new skills, making professional contacts, networking, exploring the organization or the industry. If we can draw a straight line back to one of these items, we are meeting the motivational needs of the student. But also, we know that today's students are incredibly values based and values driven. 96% of students who recently surveyed said that they want to make a difference in the world, that they want to be a part of a mission driven organization. And one of the ways that we can do that is understanding what their values are and how we can meet them where they are. So, for example, if challenging goals is a value that they hold dear, what can we do? Well, we can assign assignments and projects that help them to gain new knowledge and maybe some in-depth research about a specific concept. So we can create experiences that not only meet their motivational needs, but also meet their value system. And when we do that, we create this almost this self-propelling engine, because understanding their values, knowing their motivational needs, and then when we understand what their strengths are, they are more motivated and engaged. And that's really where we want this internship, what we want this internship to do. Now, the outcome of that is well documented. A good friend and colleague, Mary Scott, does some great research in this space about the outcomes of these types of things, and we know that the reasons why students are accepting opportunities with their particular organizations that they intern with. For example, we know that when they're treated with dignity and respect and they like the people that they work with, they're more likely to want to be a part of that organization. So, delivering meaningful engagement, we know kind of the theoretical side of it, but how do we deliver it? And that is where the concept of structure comes in. And we know that the structure of the experience is absolutely critical. Now, think about it. I mean, students are coming from a highly structured environment where, they start a class and it's really a structured experience that they are receiving. And that plan that we have, and again, we can construct that plan to deliver that structure in a really meaningful way. Um, One of the things that we talk with employers about is, again, meeting them where they are. A word that they're very used to is a syllabus. Every time a student starts a new experience in education, they get this thing called a syllabus. And a couple of years ago, I did this little experiment in one of my own classes where I didn't post the syllabus online. I didn't have it waiting for them at their desk when they showed up. I just started class and started lecturing. And about 10 minutes into class, one of the quietest students that I've ever had, her name was Amber, brilliant, but really quiet, never talked in class. She raises her hand really like with a scowl on her face. And I called on her and I said, what can I do for you? And she just said, where's the syllabus? And I said, why do you need a syllabus? And her answer was so powerful that I wanted to share it with you today. She said, so I know what I need to do to be successful in this class. The same is true for students starting an internship, that they need that roadmap because it provides the clarity, it provides the structure, and it is a way that we can deliver the experience of value. So, breaking this down even more, what is in that experience of value? And it really is and falls in these 4 areas. Culture transmission, we talked about. Professional development. What are the skills within our industry or even the department that we're working in that will help this individual to be successful? The meaningful work and mentoring. And the goal that we should be striving for is to create a balance between those 4 ideas and those 4 concepts in the delivery of the experience. Now, in order to do that, we've got to be dedicated, intentional, and deliberate about how we do that. And it is absolutely mission critical if we are going to build, deliver, enhance, grow, modify our internship experiences. So action point number 3, define the structure and the delivery, the syllabus, and focus on those 4 key areas. Because we know that when we do that, as an employer, we are creating that experience of value for this next generation of employees that we're looking to bring into our individual companies or our industry. So, where do we go from here? Well, focusing on the syllabus is certainly a good way to do that, and we can help you to do that. In creating that syllabus, we've got templates, we've got all kinds of resources that can help you to do that, to focus in these 4 areas. And the one that that we can probably help the most with a system is that professional development. And many of you may be familiar with the concept of career readiness competencies that was defined by the National Association of Colleges and Employers a couple of years ago. We actually built a learning management system that helps to deliver experiences for interns and provides reflective experiences for both their supervisor, mentor, and the student to discuss and grow within these career readiness competencies. So with that, I think I am coming in right on time, which I'm very happy about. Here is my contact information. I would love to visit with you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. What questions do we have? Let's see. It looks like
Can you see
Dawn.
the?
I
Oh,
can.
perfect.
But again, if you wanted to just chime in, Dawn had a question for small businesses, less than 10 employees that work remotely. How would an internship work? Would it be valuable for the intern if they wouldn't have actual face-to-face contact? Absolutely. And we've seen that in this past year. Now, if this global pandemic would have hit 5 or 7 years ago, I think my answer would be very different. Um, I don't think that students 5 or 7 years ago were in a place where they could have excelled in this environment. But because of the better technology that we have, more and more colleges and universities are moving to online learning platforms to deliver, if not all, but parts of learning experiences. I think that really plays to the idea that students are more comfortable, probably more comfortable than us in this environment. So yes, absolutely. The experiences that we can deliver all come back to, again, the 4th thing. I'm going to back up here. Hold on a minute. Let me back up to this. So when we look at these things, cultural transmission, professional development, meaningful work, and effective mentoring, none of these concepts are location dependent. I don't have to be sitting in an office next to you to experience these things. And I think that when we kind of grasp that concept and say, wait a minute, I can develop projects and activities and an experience around these four concepts, and that individual doesn't have to be sitting next to me to gain this, we make that paradigm shift into that delivering an experience value. We're just using different mediums. Now, for some, yeah, you've got to be, there's some large laboratories that I work with where you really have to be in the laboratory to do this, and engineering firms and, manufacturing where, you produce something and you've got to be there. But we can deliver some of this virtually. So that's a great question, and I hope that by creating this framework, we can start to see that we can deliver an experience value regardless of the modality that we choose.
So I have a question as far
Sure.
as like your experience. Is it better for a company to, I mean, take a small company like Don's with 10 employees. There may not be an opportunity for someone to sit with one department for an 8-week internship.
Yep.
Would it make sense to kind of have that intern experience different departments, or what's the best for them?
Yes, 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 yes. You're hitting on a huge piece of what the industry that I think does this the best is the banking industry. When they bring in an intern or a recent graduate and they go through this, we might call it a management development program. They will sit in different areas. They'll be at the teller window for a couple of weeks. They'll be in the finance department. They'll be in credit. They'll be in accounting. They'll be in lending. They'll be in these different areas to get them to have this holistic experience so they understand how all of these different areas work together. So we can do the same thing at a smaller scale within, for example, a company with a smaller employee base, where, again, just like I described earlier, talking with the team and saying, what are we working on that we can have an intern help with? The more diversity and the more uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of variance of types of work. That's really engaging to today's students. And they like that. They want to see the big picture. They want to be involved and make a difference. And I think that helps us to, even a small company. I mean, 75% of internships happened at companies less than 500 employees.
Right.
Small to medium-sized businesses are where internships happen. And even if we can't transition them into a full-time job at the end of the experience, they're gonna go work somewhere. And when they go and work somewhere, I'd like to that student to be prepared to go into that workforce, especially if it's in our own community, because that only benefits all of us in the long run.
Yeah, I think that leads right into Jordan's question here. So when you do kind of have that round table with your employees and you say, okay, we're going to bring in an intern, what can we give to them? To Jordan's point, how do you stop people or improve upon the process of just dumping?
I think, well, first, I think it's understanding that is a possibility, but we also want to focus on, okay, why? I'm a professor, and I tend to ask the question why 5 times. So, Jordan, let's just say that, I'm the supervisor and you're one of the employees in the office and you're dumping some work. And I'm going to say, why are you doing this? What's the outcome of this? What's the student going to get out of this? It forces us to think a little bit about the why behind it, that it's not just dumping for dumping's sake. It could be that thing that you are passing down and quote unquote dumping really has there's a reason for it, and there's a learning and development piece of it that we can extract, but we've got to know what that is it's not just, hey, I need you to enter this data into the spreadsheet. It's, where does this information go? Who's going to see it? What decisions are going to be made from it? Because when we connect the individual to that bigger why, the intern, it's like the light bulb goes off and they're like, oh, this makes sense. And I'm more engaged in it.
And that's kind of the story of this generation that's looking for internships now, is they have to know the why,
Yeah.
have to know why they're doing it.
One of the, and I'm sure that many of you have seen it. And if you haven't seen it, go out and Google it right now. It is Simon Sinek, Sinek. What was it? What is it? Oh my gosh, I just completely drew a brain blank, but it's the power of why or something like that.
Yeah.
Or finding your why.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite videos.
Yep. And it's fantastic. And I think he really does a good job of articulating why, I can't believe I'm going to say this, why the why is so important. I use that in my own classes because I want, like I'm teaching global strategy right now, and we're talking about strategic plans, but we've got to know the why, the bigger picture, before we can get into the trenches. And I think that today's students, no, I don't think, I know that today's students are much more focused on that bigger picture. And we as the employer can create an environment to help them to thrive. And quite frankly, it's our responsibility. I was doing a workshop before the pandemic hit, and we were talking about skills and professional development and how important that is within the internship experience. And this one lady who was sitting at a table kind of raised her hand and she said, yeah, but aren't they learning those skills in college or in their academic program? And I just kind of looked at her and I said, so what you're telling me is that you hope that they learn these somewhere else. I'm afraid that hope is not a very good strategy. That we have the opportunity to create and really define. And one of the analogies that I find that if anybody here's a baseball fan, I'm a Philadelphia Phillies guy, and when my beloved Phillies draft a kid out of high school or college, they don't send him to Citizens Bank Park to play in the big leagues. They send him down into what's called the farm system. And they don't just send that recruit down there and say, hey, go down there and throw the ball and catch the ball and hit the ball. They have an individual development plan for each one of those draftees that help to strengthen their strengths and mitigate their weaknesses, to help, because they understand that every person that they draft is an investment in their future. What if we looked at our internship programs the same way that Major League Baseball looked at its farm system? I think we'd have a very different approach to how and what we do in constructing that experience of value.
That's a good point. Jordan wants to, yeah, love the baseball analogy, but she wanted to know how onboarding interns versus employees are very different functions.
Because they're in different places. Think about the motivational factors. A full-time employee goes to work to earn a paycheck, to provide for their family, to pay their student loans, that's their primary motivation. What's the primary motivation for an intern? Learn new skills, get hands-on experience in their field. So when we look at, we've got to meet them where they are, and that's where they are. So our onboarding really needs to focus on that. And that's where the syllabus concept really comes in handy, because it's a word that they recognize. And it's one of those where when they get the syllabus, they're almost like, okay, I now know where I'm going. Now, but interestingly enough, Jordan, I've implemented that syllabus concept with new hire development programs, like the first 90 or 120 days, and it works just as well, which is really awesome. But when we're talking about onboarding interns, again, we need to, and I think with employees is the same way, we do need to focus on that big picture why, but I think that we need to spend more time with the interns, because this may be their very first experience in the world of work, or the very first time that their supervisor isn't named mom, dad, or professor. And that's a challenge. So we can all remember our very first boss or supervisor, for good or bad. But we need to be aware of that and think about, how do I meet them where they are? And where employees are and where interns are very different.
Awesome. Well, as we just about finish up here, one last question for everybody on the call. What is one takeaway? What is one action that any of the participants here could go back to their companies and take to begin this process or enhance their current process? Are you there? Did we lose you?
No, I'm sorry. Did you want, I
Was,
thought you were asking everybody.
no, I'm asking you. What's one step they could take?
Syllabus, meet them where they are. Those 4 areas of, cultural transmission, professional development, meaningful work, mentoring. And the mentoring piece is the one that really binds the others together. So again, that concept of meeting them where they are and understanding where they are, those motivational factors. Again, all of these things are incredibly symbiotic. You can't just do one of them. You really have to look at that bigger picture. So I know that that's not one thing, but it kind of brings in, and I think Jordan chimed in, she said, bring more interns and create a syllabus. Yeah, that's really it. Because again, in that syllabus, and we can all think back to that class, that favorite class that we had as an undergraduate or in graduate school or whatever, that when, what was in that syllabus, everything that I needed to know, when I was going to be evaluated, how I was going to be evaluated, when the projects were, what resources I need, everything was there. So I guess that's my thing.
Cool. Well, Dr. Robert Shindell, thank you so much
My
for joining us
pleasure.
today and for all of the great information. Yeah, we'll catch up with you soon.
All right. And please, folks, in my email address, my phone numbers, connect with me on LinkedIn. Anything that I can do to help support your initiatives. We got tools, we got resources, we got the books, we got videos, we got webcasts that we do that go deeper into this concept. Just let me know what you need, and we can certainly help you out.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Take good care.
Bye.